This is the Brisbane Lions Fancast with Dom Fay and Michael Whiting.
The bye is over and we are straight into the second half of the season. Welcome to the Brisbane Lions Fancast. Mike, there's a bit to discuss on off-field matters, particularly the Hall of Fame function that was last week that you went along to.
Yeah, that was a great night, Dom. It was seems like a while ago now, but it was only last week, and that was a nice little interjection in the middle of the season for the club and for those of us that were lucky enough to go along. And it was terrific to see Vossi not only elevated to legend status, which he thoroughly deserves, but just to be back at the club and talking in a positive light. Obviously, after his sacking towards the end of last season was a little bit sour in a lot of quarters, but it was great to see him back and talking so positively. And I think his best quote was saying that it was the best individual accolade he'd ever received, which is a really big call considering the guy's a Brownlow medalist and a bunch of club best and fairest and whatnot. So it was a terrific night, and I think the young players would have got a lot out of it as well. The Chris Johnson, Chris Scott, Darryl White, Sean Hart, they spoke so glowingly of having to go from the bottom, coming into the club when it was struggling and sticking it out and rising to the top. So I reckon the young players would have got a hell of a lot out of that.
Yeah, definitely. That was the big news about the club. Obviously, we had the bye over the weekend, so that's taken up most of the players' mindset, I would imagine. A bit of a break, which is probably exactly what they needed at this time of year.
4 days off for the boys. I think they're all pretty happy with that.
Yeah, definitely. Which gives us the opportunity now to briefly look back a little more in detail at the season so far and then briefly look forward to the season to come. So I suppose, the first question that you asked at this stage of the year is, of the players in the best 22 at the moment, who has been performing above expectation and who I suppose has been performing below expectation?
Well, I guess starting with the players that have gone well, obviously we want to start positive here, Dom.
Yeah.
It's been a little bit tricky because there's well-documented injuries to key players, had to play a lot of kids, etc., etc. So I had a quick look through the list before we came on, and I think if we're basing it on how would the best and fairest count be going at the moment, still a long way to go, and I think a number of people can still win it because the form hasn't been terrific overall. But I sort of came back to Tom Rockliff as being he's missed a couple of games. He missed one with suspension and he missed the most recent game with that gastro bug, but it's hard to go past him. Every single week, Rocky has turned up and given his all, like we'd expect every player to do, but produced at a very high level. So I think Tom Rockliff's been a clear standout despite missing a couple of games. After that, it becomes a little bit muddled, I think. I looked at some other names and thought Josh Green's done really well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think Jack Redden's been solid, and I think James Aish has certainly, after a couple of quiet games to start with, and that's quiet by AFL standards, not a first-year player. I thought he's been terrific all year, but I really reckon he'd be in that top 5 at the moment. He's had a very good season. Louis Taylor probably in a similar bracket there. Guys that have done okay for me are Dane Zorko and Pierce Hanley. They've been okay. Probably need a little bit more out of them, but they've been reasonably consistent without reaching the level that we know they can play so far.
Yeah, I think Hanley especially has been, we saw last year what he can do, and I'm not sure if it's been some niggling injuries or he just hasn't found form this year yet, but I think there'd be nothing that Lions fans would like to see more than Pierce Hanley back to his best like we saw against North Melbourne last year.
Pretty hard to go past Rockliff, sorry mate, but have you got anyone else to add in there, or how have you seen it? It's been difficult to get. I guess the consistency's been the issue, hasn't it?
It's definitely been a consistency issue, but I think for me, a player who I would also throw in the best performed and very impressive players is Trent West, who I probably didn't expect a great deal of.
Good point.
Coming along as a pretty cheap trade in the end. But, obviously Lou went down relatively early and West has had to shoulder the ruckload, and I think he's been much more than serviceable. I think he's been very impressive, both in the ruck and around the ground, so he's been one who's really impressed me too.
Yeah, remiss of me to miss him. You're exactly right. He's had taken on a huge burden with not much support, has he? So, Trent West has been terrific as well. So, I guess the players that have to lift, and no one ever likes having to talk about this, but you have to look at the experienced guys. They're the ones that have been in the gun, generally from the coach and the leaders at the club have singled out those senior players. So I think the guys we have to look at there are Brent Maloney, who's obviously fallen out of favour with Justin Lepich for reasons he outlined on our show here last week. So I think the best Brisbane team has Brent Maloney in it, and whatever Justin Lepich wants, Beamer has to lift and produce that, because a fit and firing Brent Maloney in a team is a huge addition. So getting him back there is crucial, I think. He's not only a great clearance player, but he can burst from packs and he's got great acceleration. So I think he's one that has to lift. A couple of other guys, probably those key defenders that we've spoken about on here a number of times, and that, not only us, but others within the club have spoken about as well. And our guest later on today, Joel Patfull, I think he's one that would think that his first 8 or 9 weeks haven't been his best, so we know he can produce a lot more. And Daniel Merritt, a little bit trickier going both ends of the ground. Struggled as a defender, gone forward and done okay despite his suspension early in the season. But I think the best Brisbane Lions outfit has those two guys firing, whichever end Merritt's at, but has those two guys. And you touched on Hanley already. So I think they're the guys for me that have to lift their game.
Yes, certainly there has been a few players who we've come to expect probably a bit better from than they've produced this year. Although I suppose there was a stat that came out this week that perhaps highlights just how difficult things have been, in that we are the most injury-affected club in the competition. I think we were number 1 on the injury ladder that AFL.com.au put together, ahead of Hawthorn, who were sitting at number 2. But there was even a bit of a considerable distance between us and them, which just goes to show how much experience we've missed through injury. And when you're missing, a Brent Staker and an Ash McGrath, suddenly Patfull maybe is covering a bit more than he normally does, and that could impact form. There's all these reasons.
That's right. It's very hard on those guys because we're probably looking at them a lot more closely now, because the young guys, as great as they've been, they've got a free run. No one expects anything from them. So whatever James Aish and Louis Taylor and Nick Robinson and Tom Cutler, these guys produce, is just a bonus. We're all excited because they've done something, which is more than you'd expect in a first-year player. So we look to those experienced guys. So you're right, there is probably a little bit of extra scrutiny on them. But a little bit of better news on that injury front is that Brent Staker did his first running on Tuesday. So that's a positive. That's a positive sign for Stakes.
There's been a lot of uncertainty around what his injury is and how to treat it for some time. So he's on the recovery trail.
He is on the recovery trail. So I'm assuming I've got a story on AFL.com by the time this goes on the website. But he's back running very slowly. It was 8 minutes of running for Stakes on Tuesday morning. So he's hoping that, best case scenario, that he might be playing footy in the next sort of 6 or so weeks, but he's a long way behind the 8 ball. Obviously, he's missed 3 months. But there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel for him. Ash McGrath's not far away as well. So the cavalry the experience anyway, slowly coming back, which would be an enormous help in the last 6 to 10 weeks of the season if those guys can get fit and back in contention for selection.
And I suppose it all starts then for us this Saturday afternoon at the Gabba against Carlton, which is an interesting matchup. I mean, early in the season, Carlton were the laughingstock of the AFL almost. People were surprised, this is a club that thinks it's in premiership contention, but it's not really performing at all. It's a bottom 4 contender at the moment, if anything. But they've turned it around a little bit. Do you think we're in with a chance? Yeah,
I definitely do. I'm leaning towards Carlton. They've won 4 out of their last 5, but they still don't convince me yet. They snuck over the line against Adelaide last week, which you've got to give them credit for. I mean, they did get over the line. So they won that. They beat West Coast in a close one a couple of weeks back. So they've managed to eke out a couple of wins. A couple of their higher profile players, I suppose, like Dale Thomas, probably found a tiny bit of form on at the weekend. But they just don't convince me, Carlton. I certainly think that it's all ifs and buts, but Brisbane will definitely get some personnel back this week. They'll get Patfull, Rockliff, Sam Mays back from the team that lost against North Melbourne. I definitely think they're right in with a chance this weekend.
If we get the basics right, and I know that's such a cliche, if you get the basics right, but I just think legitimately it is what it comes down to. If you do get the basics right, which we didn't against North Melbourne, then you're every chance of getting the win on Saturday. And I'd say that probably I am also leaning in the direction of Carlton by maybe just a couple of goals. But, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we turn up and play the kind of footy that we've played on a few occasions this year and get over the top of them.
And you'd think more so than almost any team in the league that another cliche, but coming at the right time. But just because Brisbane's got such a young list that's played, they were getting tired. They're shouldering a lot of the load and a lot of responsibility. So 8 or 9 weeks into the season is about when the rigours of week to week sets in. So I think the guys like Aish, Taylor, Robertson, Cutler, Gardner, these guys, they would have loved the break, and as would a couple of the guys, obviously, that had the gastro bug. Like, that would have done them the world of good just to fully recharge rather than having to get ready for a game in 7 days' time. So I guess it'll be a fresh Brisbane Lions, and they're definitely in with a chance. And if it's all ifs, but if you win this one, you get a bit of momentum. You play the Western Bulldogs and GWS the following weeks, and the season can turn around pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. We could go 3 wins. We could be at 4 wins in 3 weeks' time, which
Have
really
we convinced you all?
The optimism's definitely there. And we will be chatting about all club matters with Joel Patfull on the Fancast right after this.
The best way to keep track of everything Lions is to head to lions.com.au. It's the first place to find the latest Lions news and videos, get the lowdown on upcoming games, results and player stats. There's also great ways to interact with live chats, downloads and Player of the Year voting updates. And with a social media hub, you can connect with all the Lions social media activity. lions.com.au. Everything Lions, all in one place.
Joining us on the Fancast this week is 2-time best and fairest winner over the past 2 seasons, Joel Patfull. Welcome to the show, Joel. How was the break?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Mate, the break was good. It was a good chance to sort of take a few days away from footy and relax and get the body right and sort of take a mental break as well from footy. So it was a good few days.
How's the health, Joel? You were one of the guys that was struck down by the nasty gastro bug before the break. How severe was it, and how long did it take you to get over that?
Mate, it took me a good few days. I got sick on Thursday, and probably just the timing of it made me miss the game. I was still probably cook on Sunday and started to come good on Monday. So knocked me around a bit. I lost a few kilos, but sort of last week I was able to train and get a few sessions in, and obviously had a bit of time off over the weekend as well. So the health's really good, and mate, fit and ready to go this weekend.
Did it rattle the boys pre-game, knowing there were quite a few players in the group who may have been a bit affected, some who obviously were missing because of it? Did it make you guys, or make the players who were playing, go in slightly a bit downtrodden already?
Mate, I don't think so. I mean, we're all professional athletes and everyone was ready to go. But I mean, I can't tell you exactly. I didn't have much to do with the playing group. They're trying to keep me away from most of them for the few days leading into the group, just to make sure no one else got it. So I was in quarantine for the days leading into the game.
Joel, just looking at the first 9 weeks, your own form, is it fair to say that you struggled a bit at the first part of the season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably my first 4 or 5 weeks were pretty poor, really inconsistent, and sort of losing a lot of one-on-one contests, which is what I sort of pride myself on over the last few years. And I sort of, went away and had a bit of a think about it and worked on a few different things and was able to turn that around a little bit. I think my last few weeks have been a bit better. I'm still not really that happy with how my year's going, so I'm looking forward to a big sort of second half of the year, and hopefully that sort of starts this weekend.
What do you put that down to at the moment? Would you say it's perhaps the new game plan you're still getting your head around? Is it covering for a few younger players who are still learning the structures at this level, or is it just a bit of a patch of bad form?
Yeah, I think early on I was probably just a bit slow to get my season started. I think I was having a few concentration lapses during games, which were really costing me. And that was probably my first month or so. Game plan, that was all sort of, we got that sorted out in the pre-season, so I wouldn't say that was an issue. But I think, just little sort of lapses in my concentration, and like I said, losing those sort of crucial one-on-one contests, that was really costing me.
Joel, last year, you obviously had a very good last 2 years, but the back half of last year, I think you mentioned that you were a lot more aggressive, like you were going for your marks a lot more. Is that a mindset that you might look to bring into the second half of this year as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my sort of default for a game is pretty defensive. So I try. That's one of the things I've sort of tried to turn around the last month or so, and I think that sort of started with that St Kilda game when I went for a few more of my marks and was a bit more aggressive in my positioning. So that's something I've been working on, and probably something that I need to keep working on to make sure that's at the front of my mind and sort of take the game on a bit more. Absolutely.
There's been a fair bit of frustration among some fans to do with the fact that now accepting the fact that we're in a bit of a rebuilding phase again. But obviously I would imagine that doesn't compare to some of the frustration that perhaps some senior players like you who've been around the club for a while are feeling. I mean, last year, obviously, things started to build more and more, and now, again, you find yourself near the bottom of the ladder. Is that really a frustrating thing, or is it pretty easy right now to cope with that, seeing as you can see a clear direction?
Yeah, I mean, it is frustrating. I mean, we obviously, we want to win games. That's why we play football, and we want to be competitive in those games. So, I mean, in that aspect, it is frustrating. But like you say, there is a clear plan, and you see the young guys coming through. So you can see in the near future that we're going to turn it around. But, I mean, obviously we're out there to win games and to be competitive. So, it's frustrating on one hand, but on the other hand, it's exciting to see the potential coming through.
Joel, one of the young defenders down there we've seen a bit of is Darcy Gardner. Can you tell us a little bit about him and your thoughts on him so far?
Yeah, he's a great young player coming through. He's still young, but he's got a really strong body, and he's a real competitor. He loves sort of niggling his opponents, and he's really physical in the way he goes about it. I think he's been really good, and I mean, he's played 5 or 6 games now at least. And I think with every game he plays, he looks more comfortable down there. So I think we'll see a fair bit of him in the next few years.
Is it particularly, I suppose, a challenge for you coming from the past few years where you spent a fair bit of time playing alongside very experienced players like Daniel Merritt and Matt Maguire as the other key defenders down there, to now, throughout patches of this year, just being you along with Justin Clark in obviously his second year of senior footy, and Darcy Gardner in his first year? Has that been a challenge for you, going from being alongside these experienced guys to now being really the sole experienced key defender a lot of the time?
Yeah, it has been a bit different. It's been a bit of a challenge at times, but I think the more those guys sort of play, the more comfortable we get. I think that Essendon game, I think we got Matt back there, and I think just with that little bit of experience made a bit of difference. And I think the more we can sort of try and get a core group of players together, the better that back line's going to be. I think through either, injury or form over the first part of the year, we've probably lost at least sort of 1 or 2 defenders most weeks. And then even last week against North Melbourne, we lost like Matt through suspension, and then Maisie and myself was through illness and injury. So we're just struggling to sort of keep those 6 or 7 guys there for any amount of time. So I think if we can get that core group of 6 or 7 guys together for at least 2 or 3 weeks, I think that'll make it a lot better for all of us involved.
I guess you got your first chance this week then, Joel. Yourself obviously available, Goose is available, Sam Mays will be available again. So what are you expecting, first match back? Yeah, well,
I think exactly that. I think I expect those guys to come back in, and we can try and sort of build that core group of 6 or 7 players. And I'd like to see that group of players really have a strong game and try and keep them together for the next 2, 3, however long, so we can try and build that core backline and really build a strong backline back there.
Obviously, last week was the Hall of Fame function up here in Brisbane. You have been at the club for one of the longest times now of the players on the list, and you would have been to quite a few of these functions now. You did just miss the success period by a few years. So I'm wondering, do these kind of events really just develop and continually build that hunger and that desire within someone like you to get some more finals footy, because you haven't seen much of it during your time at the club?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've played a few finals up here, but I think especially the last few years have been pretty tough going. And to hear some of the stories of what the guys went through, they had some tough times too before they went through the premiership years. It really does sort of build that hunger to play good footy and to play finals footy. And I think the team's going in the right direction, and I think it was really good for everyone to get there and to hear the stories, and to think that we realistically we're not that far away, and if we keep going the way we're going, you never know, there might be some success just around the corner.
And obviously nice to see Vossi back at the club too. Joel, it was a great night for him.
Yeah, it was. I think everyone was wrapped in the room to see Vossi get his legend status, and it's always great to see Vossi. He's obviously a huge part of the club and a legend of the club, and I was really happy to see him get up there.
The next few weeks have been marked by both the coach and the captain, Adcock and Lepper, as really key focus for the club. There are some winnable games coming up. Do you very much feel that sense that there is a real opportunity to rebuild the season, I suppose, here and rebuild some respect?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we play play a few teams sort of around the same position on the ladder as us. A few teams have only had a couple of wins as well, so there's big opportunities for us to have a few wins. And like I said earlier, I mean, that's what we're playing for. We want to win games of footy. We want to get a good feeling around the footy club and expose these younger players to a winning culture. So it's going to be a big emphasis over the next, I think we've got a block of 7 games before the next bye. So the next 7 games are really, really important for us.
And it starts with Carlton, and last year they come up here and you ended up running them quite close. You had Jared Waite that night from memory, Joel, and he had a really good game. He's a difficult opponent. Would you be looking forward to playing him again and I guess turning the tables?
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely got the better of me last year. But I mean, yeah, I'm looking forward to I'll take on the challenge if that's the way it goes, and looking forward to a really close game. I think they've sort of hit a bit of form in the last month or so. They've won a few games, so they'll be confident coming up here. But like I said before, the guys are really looking forward to a solid block, and it definitely starts this weekend against Carlton.
Well, all the best for that match and the matches to follow. Hopefully we can get some wins on the board, and thanks for joining us on the show today.
Cool, thanks guys.
This week, the Lions return to the field against Carlton at the Gabba, 4:40pm on Saturday. Definitely head along and check that one out. I think the Essendon match showed that Saturday Twilight at the Gabba is a real winner of a time slot up here, I think. The reserves are up against the Suns reserves. That's at the Burpengary Sporting Complex at the Moreton Bay Central Sports Complex. Sorry, that's Saturday as well at 11am, so you can get a bit of back-to-back Lions there if you want. And I know we had a hefty win over the Suns reserves last time we played them, so you'd think we might be in with another good showing then. It's a very interesting match for the seniors on Saturday afternoon, mate, because I think this one really will. And again, it feels like we're listing off cliches today, but it really, you feel like it will set the tone for the second half of the season.
Yeah, it does. Justin Lepich and Jed Adcock have both spoken in the last week about how important the next 6-week block is, the block between the byes. It might be 7 matches actually, but because they are those winnable games, or the teams that are in the bottom half of the ladder, I suppose, the games that you can set yourself for with a realistic expectation of being competitive and also winning. So Carlton definitely falls into that bracket. They've fallen over the line a few times. They've got a 4-5 record. They're going along okay. They've certainly improved from the start of the season, but by no means are they out of Brisbane's league. And I expect Brisbane to be highly competitive for at least, well, I would say at least 3 quarters, but I would expect into the last quarter as well. So can't wait to see how they handle Mark Murphy, who always does really well against the Lions. So there's always a great sort of midfield battle. That's where the game's always won and lost. So I'm really looking forward to watching that on Saturday.
A quick tip out of you?
Carlton by a couple of goals for me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Carlton by 12 or 18, I think, will be the result. But I think it will be a very improved performance on the North Melbourne match. But I don't think that would be very hard, in all honesty. Hopefully we just get a few more.
Bloody better be, or this show might be finished.
That is it for the Fancast this week. We'll be back next week to review the Carlton match and look forward to the Western Bulldogs.